Family dynamics are the patterns of relation or relating or interactions between family members, the quality of the connectivity between family members. This is very important, each family system is unique and the dynamics or the interaction is unique to that family. There are common patterns but that we can relate to or observe, but even that commonality will be unique within each family. All families, yours and mine included, have helpful and some unhelpful dynamics, let's say balanced or unbalanced family dynamics. Where there's little or no contact with the family, a young person will have been influenced by the dynamics of in earlier years. Family dynamics often have a strong influence on the way young people see themselves, see the world, and influence their attachment in relationships, their behaviors, and their well-being. An understanding of the impact of family dynamics on a person, self-perception may help counselors understand the way that people connect to one another. It helps to understand behavior in context of relationships. It teaches us alignments, hierarchies, roles, characteristics, etc. And how people use their strengths to either keep the dysfunctional alive or the functional alive. Listening to a client's narrative about their family can help us to understand how this person got to be where they are. In the previous video lecture, we defined family and looked at relationships. We are now coming to what is called family patterns, unlocking family patterns. A family pattern, it can be defined, or we refer to a family pattern as a quality of the relationship between the members of that particular family, between parents and children. For example, family patterns have a wide variety and there is an emotional undertone within the family pattern, as well as an attitude of the members of the family towards one another. Some families are warm and others are cool, some are close and some are symbiotic, others keep each other at a distance, and some are open to friends and relatives and others are not. Some children are accepted, and in others children are distanced, there's a distance between the child and the parent. Such patterns or elements of patterns may range from non-conscious to fully realized. Negative and harmful family attitudes, standards, and behavior lay the groundwork for behavioral miscommunication. For example, such as rejection, triangulation of the child into a marital relationship between parents, and so forth, and inconsistent discipline, leniency, chaotic lifestyles. These type of patterns are things that we are going to explore within the context of family dynamics. I have tried to identify the influences within the family dynamics. There can be more unique to the family. Let's look at the left-hand column first. The nature of the parents' relationship, in other words, how the parents talk to each other in front of their children, how they demonstrated love to one another, did they hug, did they yell. That is what we're talking about. Having a particularly soft or a particularly strict parent. How many children are in the family? Personalities of the family members. If there's an absent parent, this can be a father or a mother. The mix of members who are living in the same household. The level and type of influence from extended family. A chronically sick or disabled child within the family. Uh, the following are also influences within the family dynamic: events that have affected family members, an affair, a divorce, trauma, death, unemployment, homelessness. Other issues such as family violence, abuse, alcohol and other drug use, mental difficulties, or other disabilities. What is the family values? The culture, the ethnicity, including beliefs about gender roles, parenting practices, power or status of different family members, nature of attachment within the family, like a secure or insecure. We're going to talk about attachment. The dynamics of previous generations, parents and grandparents, and so on. Then there are also broader systems: social, economic, political, poverty. You can add religion, you can add schooling, you can add education, the level of emotional maturity, spiritual maturity. There are many dynamics that influences a family system. People take on different roles or functionalities within the family system. So each person within the family system have a specific role, how they act and how they perform. These roles is the result of the existing family dynamics. So it's a current reality. It's also rooted in the past, what we talk about learned behavior. The way that people have interact in their roles may not be the result of a deliberate, intentional choice. Some of the more common roles that young people take on in the family may include the family hero is your, we can say, your type A personality, a hardworking, overachieving perfectionist. Through their own achievements, the hero tries to bring the family together and create a sense of normality. This role is usually taken on by the oldest child, though not always all the time. They seek to give hope to the rest of the family. Unfortunately, a driving need to do everything right tends to put an extreme amount of pressure on the hero, leaving them highly anxious and susceptible to stress-related illnesses later in life. The people pleaser. This person denies the reality of the dysfunctionality. The goal of this role is to smooth things over within the family in order to protect members of the family. The people pleaser convince themselves that there is no problem, that the family is functional, and make light of a serious situation. They may make excuses for their loved ones, and they tend to make sure that everybody is okay, and they work hard to help people be okay. The scapegoat. The scapegoat is just what you would expect. The one person who gets the blame for all the problems. This role tends to be taken on normally by the second oldest child. He or she offers the family a sense of purpose by providing someone else to blame. They voice the family's collective anger while shielding the dysfunctionality. As scapegoats get older, males may act out in violence, while females may act out with promiscuity. The mascot. The mascot or class clown. They try to deflect dysfunctionality by supplying humor. It can be the youngest child. They are fragile, vulnerable, and desperate for approval of others. Providing comic relief is the defense against pain, and fear and anxiety plays a huge role in their lives. The lost child, or the adaptable one. It can be the middle child. They're shy, withdrawn, and sometimes thought of as invisible to the rest of the family. They don't seek or get a lot of attention from family members, especially when the dysfunction is at a premium. They try to put off making decisions, having trouble with forming intimate relationships, and choose to spend time on lonely activities, moving away from attaching to relationships as way to cope. The family life cycle. What exactly is the family life cycle? The family life cycle is the emotional and intellectual stages that you pass through from childhood to your retirement years as a member of a family. And we call this the life cycle of the family. At each stage, you face challenges in your family life that allow you to build or gain new skills. Gaining these skills help you to work through the changes that nearly every family goes through. Not everyone passes through these stages smoothly. Situations such as illness, financial problems, or death can impact these stages. It's important, if you look at our cycle, there's the I-we balance, from independence to a coupling. So you move from unattached young adult to independence to coupling, where we finally become a we, and eventually when the children become teenagers, there's the we-I struggle, and then the family has to launch. Who are we and who are the child, adult child, and the family in later years or retirement years. We are now going to look at each of these stages individually, and I just want to say, remember that the stages merge. It's not as though you clearly can see moving from one stage to another stage as clearly as all of that. So let us begin with the unattached young adult. Major task that you have to manage is how are you going to live, your way of life, and the selection of a life partner. The transition or emotional process of transition, what you have to do is accept parent-offspring differentiation. You are now your own person, moving away from your parents, yet they still have an influence in your life. There are second order changes as well, differentiation of the self in relation to the family of origin, development of intimate peer relationships, and establishment of self in respect of work, independence, finding a life partner, and so on. Problems that can occur in this stage can be emotional, social, and even struggling to find a job. Setting yourself up, building your own house, you're going to live in a flat, and so on. Those are some of the problems that can be encountered. Now we move on to the newly married couple. This is the joining of families through marriage. You are now going to create your new family. Two people from their own family of origin now comes together and start a new family. The emotional process of transition, this is a commitment to a new system. That commitment levels often helps a person to negotiate the changes of the family life cycle. What's second order changes? You form a new marital system or a new family system, and there's an alignment or a rebalance of relationship with the extended families, with the in-laws, siblings, friends, to include the spouse. So there's a change that must happen. Problems encountered is adjustment, emotional immaturity versus emotional maturity, and whose friends are. Do we have couple friends? Are we continuing to seeing our friends that when we were single? What is happening in our social circle? Now we move on to the families now settled and they are having their first child. So a family with young children, it begins with the birth of the first child. Emotional process of transition, it is how the family system can create enough space to allow new members into the family system. There are second order changes that the couple have to make, except they may need to make space for the child or children. They now, where they were just adults and husband and wife now have to take on parenting roles. They become moms and dads. And there's a change with their parents because the parents now become grandparents. What are the grandparents' roles? How and the role between the adult with the baby and their parent changes. So there's a lot of changes that happens in this stage. How you negotiate the change is important. Problems encountered with adjustment of the children, the influence of the grandparents can also be a problem. We now move on to a family with teenagers. This is normally the most turbulent season for families. Why? Because the young adolescent or teenager is now struggling to find their own identity and they need more of their own space. So they are questioning the we space of a family. There needs to be, so what is the process of transition that the family have to go through? It increasing flexibility of boundaries to include the child's independence. There are other changes as well. There's a change in the parent-child relationship because the teenager have more responsibility and move in and out of the system. There's a refocus on the midlife of the marital and career issues of the adults. And there's a change happening within the family system towards care for an older generation. The grandparents might come to live with them or might need additional care. So obviously problems with teenagers. Teenage stage is a difficult stage for parents to negotiate, as well as the influence of grandparents. There's a huge age gap or generational gap between the teenager and the grandparent. Now finally, the children has to launch. They have to leave the home. The so-called and most interesting that we all know it as empty nest. This starts when the first child leaves the home. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be the oldest child. Sometimes the second oldest child may leave before the first child, depending on unique circumstances. So this launching the family begins when the first child leaves the home. It ends when the last one have left the family of origin. Now, in this season, children come backwards and forwards. I know how difficult it was for children to leave. They go to university, then come back for holidays. Then they go and they find their first job but come back for this and so on. So the family have to accept multitudes of entry and exits into the family system. So for the adults staying behind, it's difficult to find a rhythm of relationship for themselves. The second order changes that must happen is there's a renegotiation of a marital system. You must remember, suddenly you are two people again, but now you're in your 50s, where your first time that you were together, you were 20, and in between you raised children. So there's a whole new system. You have grown older, you have grown more mature, that has to be renegotiated. Development of adult relationship between parents and their grown children. Some parents just can't let go, and other grown children don't want to grow up. There's the realignment of our relationships to include in-laws and grandchildren. And now comes the place. This is normally the place where the family loses either grandparents or a parent, and disabilities and deaths may enter the family system. And also, it's time that the parents who stay behind start to engage in a new way of living, a new rhythm of life. And lastly, we have the family in later years, or the retirees, or the senior citizens. This is the final stage of the family life cycle. And there's a change in generational roles. The children now becomes the primary caregivers of the family, and the grandparents have lessened responsibility. Grandparents have to allow the parents to get on with raising their children. However, in this season of life, it is critically important that social interaction needs to take place. The measurement of success in this season of a person's life is whether they engage life or disengage life. If they disengage life, they just sit, let's say, in front of a television. If they engage life, they get involved in new activities, starting a painting or fixing up houses or making ashtrays or something like that. Engage in life within their social circle, within their church. They might even move into a retirement village. So there's lots of changes happening, and the successful integration of change is the task in this last family cycle. So as you can see, this is a very complicated family cycle. And to make a side note, this is for a couple married that does not divorce, or somebody that has not married somebody who was married before and remarried a widow or widower. So if we add those dynamics to it, it becomes a far more complicated life cycle. In the next slide, we're going to look at family systems, and we're going to just look at an introduction of a model to understand dysfunctional family systems. As we can see, to understand family and the role that the family plays, it's far more complex than what we can actually think. We're going to briefly look at a proposal from Dr. David Olson called the Circumplex Model of Family Systems, or a family map, to try and understand what is meant by the complexities of a family system. He has done many years of research within social, humanistic, and family dynamics. So he's our leading expert in reality, and his model is based on flexibility, cohesion, and communication. Here is the map. It's certainly intimidating at first glance. So let us look at the words that makes up the map to understand what we are saying. Remember, he spoke about flexibility. Flexibility is the vertical axis. Look towards the left of the slide and you will see flexibility. Flexibility is explained as follows. A family is flexible when it comes to certain leadership, certain roles, and certain rules within a family system. Think a moment about your own family of origin. How flexible was leadership and rules, for example, within the system? He had brought in a scale: chaotic, flexible, structured, and rigid. And we need to understand what each of these means. Chaotic, there may be no defined house rules or roles or even leadership. Everything happens spontaneously without any order. Then they are flexible and structured. Within our model, we always want to have a balanced viewpoint, so we want to go for flexible or structured. Flexible, there are rules and roles, and they change when change is appropriate. And structured, the rules and roles change when appropriate, but not often. On the other side of the scale is called rigid. Rigidity is about strict rules and roles. They stay stagnant, an important word, and do not change. If you go look at the horizontal axis, is where we measure cohesion. Cohesion is measured in terms of engagement. So we start at the left-hand side with disengagement and move to the right to enmeshment. Remember, right at the beginning of our lectures, we talked about connectivity, and this is how we measure connectivity. Disengage means that people are emotionally detached from one another. Separated means that the family members don't spend time together. Connected is a healthy or balanced emotional and physical connectivity. And then we get to the other side of the end, enmeshment. Enmeshment where there are blurred boundaries and family members are exceedingly emotionally connected and highly reactive to one another. Those are the bases that he has developed to understand his explanation of a family system. Now we need to go look at a little bit in more detail about each of these. When we look at the levels of flexibility and we look at the word chaotic, you will see it talks about lack of leadership, there are dramatic role shifts, erratic discipline, and too much change. No security is modeled for the family. When we look at what he means by flexible, it says that the parents have shared leadership. There is something which is called democratic discipline. That means that discipline is appropriate to the action that is needed. Role sharing changes as the family cycle changes, and change happens when it's needed. That is healthy. When we looked at the word structured, what does a family look like when they are structured? Leadership does change and is somewhat shared, not completely, not as much as flexible. There are a more democratic discipline, but it can also be erratic. It's sort of like between the two of them. Roles are stable and this brings security to the children. But the family systems only change when there's a demand on it. They don't grow into change. However, they do change when there is a demand. Let's say a grandparent comes to live with the family. Rigidity. Rigidity is the opposite of chaotic. There is the authority leadership, the person that will say, I'm the boss and you do it the way I say. There is no debate in leadership. There's one person who takes the lead. There are strict discipline. You have to keep to the family rules. Roles do not change, if at all. And there is not enough change or adaptivity to change in the family cycle. This rigidity, family seems to shatter when children leave their house. Now we're going to look at the cohesion factor. And cohesion factor is quite important because we have to be independent, and he talks about an I-we balance. Remember that we spoke about the I-we balance already when we looked at the family cycle. Now let us look at the balance between I and we. Remember that a family is made out of individuals. That is called the I. And there's the we. That is the family. Let us just quickly look at how that works. The levels of cohesion are then measured by the I-we balance. When they are disengaged, each member is their own I. Somebody once told me, when they get home from school or work, everybody goes to the kitchen, gets their plate of food, and then go and eat in their rooms. And tomorrow they see each other for breakfast and go back and go to school. So that is a disengagement. Then we have the separated, the I-we. There's a low to moderate closeness. There's some loyalty to members, and the people are more independent than dependent on one another. Connected. When we are connected, we are in balance. There's enough space for the individual to grow to themselves, and there's enough space for us to be part of a family, to have a we identity. There is a moderate to high closeness, high loyalty, and we talk about interdependent relationships, not dependency, interdependent relationships. And then we get to the other side of the scale, the enmeshed family. Those are the families that don't have separation between I and we. They are we. It's sort of like, touch me, you touch my family. very, very high loyalty and a high dependency on one another. They cannot function without one another. Now, if you look at the colors in the circle, ideally, we want to be in the blue range because we have to be honest. Because we are made up of individuals, and if you are really honest, it's rare that people will be in the purple color in the center. Most of us will be on the side of between the blue and the purple. That's for most of us. And then a family is dysfunctional when they're on the outer edges, that yellowish, mustardly yellow color. That is when a family is actually dysfunctional. Families can move from one space to another. They are not dysfunctional all the time. Let's say a couple retires and for a while they find themselves chaotically disengaged because they do not know what to do, but they can grow to become, for instance, flexibly connected. Within this family system, how do you think people communicate with one another? If you have to place yourself, in your family system, where would you place yourself? My husband and I currently are in the cycle where our children are leaving the house. So we are growing closer together as a couple, finding more we space. In fact, if I'm honest with you, we find it intrusive when there's a third person in our house because we are getting used to and set in our ways. So that's also a challenge. Just by the way, I don't think that's always so healthy. But we are getting used to our own pace of life, which is far quieter and more at peace than when we have young people in the house that are constantly moving and making a noise. For other people, we were visiting and their family, it seems to be chaotic because these grandparents and cousins and nephews and nieces all living in the same space, and they are as happy as everybody because they are, can we say, flexibly connected. Everybody goes their own thing. I don't know how the parents knew where everybody is with all the things that they had to do, but they are flexibly connected, for instance. So somehow we need to find the balanced place, and it's not going to be always perfect. Most of us, because of our sinful nature or our weakness or just humanity, will find ourselves in that blue area at some point. A dysfunctional family can be identified by these elements: extreme rigidity in family rules, or on the other side, chaotic rules, little or no communication. I just want to make a point here that when we talk about little or no communication, communication talks about getting your point across and being heard. So there can be a lot of yelling and screaming and accusing, but that doesn't mean communication took place. It doesn't mean when we say no communication they are not talking, although it can mean that, but it means that the message is not heard and it's not communicated clearly. High levels of tension and arguing. The other day we were running, and on a Sunday morning, as we were running past somebody's house, all we heard was this shouting, this argument happening between two strangers. So here is the issue. It's arguing, it's hearing, it's loud, and that arguing stimulates tension. Extended periods of silence, or extended periods of blame, or avoidance of the other person. Then there is the overall message of don't feel, don't talk, don't trust, which we will discuss just before we close this lecture. People from dysfunctional families can end up either in abusive relationship or unable to maintain relationships. Adult children from dysfunctional families guess what is normal, judge themselves without mercy, have difficulty in completing tasks or projects, they take themselves very seriously, have a difficulty with intimate relationships, which we will discuss later, feeling different from other people, the need for approval and affirmation is a constant driver in their lives. They are either over responsible or completely irresponsible. They avoid conflict because they were never taught how to solve an argument, or they're aggravated by, let's say, putting oil on a fire, but they rarely deal with the conflict. They live in fear of rejection and abandonment, but because of that, they don't allow people close to them, and other people experience rejection by them. Next, we're going to talk about the family rules. We have simplified the family rules from dysfunctional families. Family rules basically are 3. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. These interplay with one another. It's not an either or. It can be all 3, 1, or a combination of the 3. A personal pattern of attachment develops. Family rules precedes this pattern, and the child begins to close the emotional responses and develop a coping mechanism. The child refines coping mechanism through conditioning, and this role determines relationship behavior. Let us quickly talk about the rules of don't talk. The family under this rule goes something like this. Don't talk to anyone outside of our family about what you experience within our family. This is a normal family and it's nobody else's business. Don't talk with it within the family either. So you don't talk brothers, sisters, or mom and dad. Stay on a safe subject. Pretend that everything is okay. And someday it will be okay. Don't ask questions that will upset somebody. Remember, we're a family. No one else will understand our family. So don't try and explain it to somebody else. The question that now arises is, who can they trust? So this leads us to the second rule, don't trust. This rule is communicated something like this. You can't trust anybody outside of the family. What will they say and think about our family? Do you want to take responsibility for that? Other families are just like ours. You need to care for us and not worry about them. Our family depends on you, so don't let us down. Trust is discouraged within this family through broken promises and failed commitments by the primary caregivers. The failure of the primary caregivers to follow through with what is important to their children fuels this mistrust. The parents may be noticeable for their lack of attendance at their children's performances when they participate in a play or on the sport field. Or they fail to pick up their children on time or always late. The child, unable to talk, now experience an eroding trust factor and emotional shutdown. This leads us, because we can't trust and we can't talk, this leads to shutdown. And this is the rule, don't feel. If you won't allow yourself to think about the situation, it won't hurt so bad. After all, you don't really hurt at all. These are just silly, childish emotions. It's better to put them out of your head completely. That way you'll make life better for yourself. We call this denial. Denial begins to reshape the perceptions of the family. Some sense has to be made out of the craziness, so unfinished business goes underground to resurface within the next generation. This is not a generational curse. I just want to say this here. This is learned, conditioned behavior that passes from one generation to another generation. The child loses their spontaneous nature and becomes a modified person. Some families actually use statements to stop emotions. Stop crying. Be a man. This is not something to cry about. Or children should be seen and not heard. we must always remember that we have emotions because God created us with emotions. And it's important that we do deal with our emotions. Now, those are the rules that then governs the child. You know the well-known saying, monkey see, monkey do? Not knowing how else to react or engage in relationships. We say it like this: not knowing anything else, being unable to reflect their true feelings. The child practice their relationship skills as they have learned it in the family of origin. Now, when they start their own family, they practice the same dysfunctional family or relational connectivity in their new family, and the new family experiences miscommunication because of a lack of skills being able to actually feel, to talk about what you're feeling, and to trust one another. This is a long and complicated lecture. There are so many dynamics to family systems. Please note, we have touched upon the family system. We are now moving, and you would have noticed that we're starting to talk about dysfunctional families. And the reality is, I just want to tell you that the most famous families from the Bible have been are dysfunctional. Go have a look at the family tree of David. Go look at the family tree of Jesus Christ himself, and go and look at the humanity factor of every person in that family tree. You and me are not exempted from that. But with Christ in our midst, we can come to healing, because Christ invites us. He tells us, come and talk to me. Trust me, for I am your Redeemer. And lastly, you are allowed to feel, because God himself tells us that because he loved us so much, he sent Jesus to die for us. That's a message of emotion, a message of acceptance, and a message of healing for all of us.